Chairman of the session, Professor Vishwas Mishra, my co-speakers, distinguished guests, Professor Sridhar Sharma, Professor Uday Jain, Professor Nathawat, delegates, and my dear students. Positivism is believed to play a very significant role in one's life. It is said that positivism or positive energy transmits from one individual to the other. In the same parlance, if it can transmit from one individual to another individual, it can very much transmit to one's life as a whole. Therefore, positivism is certainly likely to have an influence on the quality of life. With this assumption, I look for the literature that if someone has studied the relationship between positivism and quality of life, and what I would get based on the review, I have tried to gather my views and which I am presenting before you. A positive view of the future is an important element of psychological well-being. Those with very low levels of well-being show the lack of anticipation of future positive experience. The importance of anticipating future positive outcomes is represented by the approach that view well-being as the result of people being engaged in striving towards valued goals that they believe are likely to be achieved. A positive mind anticipates happiness, joy, health, and a successful outcome from every situation and action. At the same time, looking at the other dimension, which we can assume that has an positivism influences, is the quality of life, which refers to evaluating the general well-being of individuals and societies. It is used in a wide range of contexts, including healthcare, work, and politics. Quality of life should not be confused with the concept of standard of living, which is based primarily on income. Instead, the indicators of the quality of life include not only wealth and employment, but also the built environment, physical and mental health, education, recreation, and leisure time, and social belonging. Diverse objective and subjective indicators across the range of disciplines work on subjective well-being surveys, and the psychology of happiness have spurred renewed interest. Also, frequently related are the concepts such as freedom, human rights, and happiness. However, since happiness is subjective and hard to measure, other variables are generally given priority. It has also been shown that happiness, as much as it can be measured, does not necessarily increase correspondingly with the comfort that results from increasing income. As a result, standard of living should not be taken as the only measure of happiness. Unlike per capita GDP or standard of living, both of which can be measured in financial terms, it is harder to make objective and long-term measurements of the quality of life experienced by nations or groups of people. researchers have begun in recent times to distinguish two aspects of personal well-being. Emotional well-being, in which respondents are asked about the quality of their everyday emotional experiences, the frequency and intensity of their experiences of, for example, joy, stress, sadness, anger, and affection. And second, life evaluation, in which respondents are asked to think about their life in general and evaluate it against a scale. The Physical Quality of Life Index is a measure developed by David Morris in the 1970s, based on literacy, infant mortality, and life expectancy. Although not as complex as other measures, it has now essentially been replaced by the Human Development Index. The Happy Planet Index, introduced in 2006, is unique among quality of life measures in that, in addition to standard determinants of well-being, it uses each country's ecological footprint as an indicator. A 2010 study by two Princeton University professors looked at 1,000 randomly selected US residents over an extended period. It concludes that their life evaluations, that is, their considered evaluations of their life against a stated scale of 1 to 10, rise steadily with income. On the other hand, their reported quality of emotional daily experiences, their reported experiences of joy, affection, stress, sadness, or anger, level off after a certain income level, that is approximately $75,000 per year. Income above $75,000 does not lead to more experiences of happiness nor to further relief of unhappiness or stress. Below this income level, it was reported that respondents reported decreasing happiness and increasing sadness and stress, implying the pain of life's misfortunes, including disease, divorce, and being alone, is exacerbated by poverty. I will be skipping some of the slides in view of the time constraint. As pointed out earlier, the quality of life is not only a function of material well-being, it also has to do with psychological health. And if one is positive in his disposition, if one thinks positively, if one experiences positivism, emanates positivism, psychological health is going to be better. It involves dignity, courage, ability to love, awareness of beauty, and lack of fear and anxiety. The social system which meets basic needs and maximizes development of human potential is one in which quality of life is maximized. People are primarily motivated to maximize the meaningfulness of their lives. The inclusion of meaning in quality of life studies can help in redirecting the quality of life research toward an agenda in which subjective quality of life is not the ultimate dependent variable. People gravitate towards some activities and structures because they provide a stray sense of meaning and they experience their lives as well. Through this paper, what I am trying to suggest is that we need to have more empirical studies to understand the relationship between positivism and quality of life. Though it is obvious, theoretically it appears, yes, there has to be a significantly high relationship. But is it really so? Number one. Number two, does this relationship cut across the cultural barriers. Empirical studies need to be done because I have not been able to find many studies linking these two variables. With this message, I close my presentation here. Thank you very much.